Good morning, everyone. Shalom. So I'm sorry I'm not going to speak in Hebrew today, but I'm going to speak in English. Hold on. So I'm very happy to be here today to discuss the future of mobility and how we as public transporters and public operators can help you achieve what is going on and how mobility needs to evolve, basically. So I would like to start maybe with a short presentation on Transdev. For those of you who might not know our group, basically what we do, our mission statement is to empower your freedom to move every day. The way we do this is by, we're proud to provide 11 million passenger trips every day thanks to efficient, easy-to-use transportation modes. And we do this on many countries. I'm sorry, I'm going to take my breath here. Okay, so we are present today in 20 countries in the world. We are mostly present on transit, heavy rail, other modes and services, as well as a B2B business. And all of this is backed by digital and technology teams that we have throughout the world, which are working on mobility as a service, connected transportation on demand, and shared mobility, as well as autonomous systems, and backed by a zero emission strategy. So this is basically our global footprint that you can see here. And Transdev in 2018 was 82,000 employees, almost 7 billion revenues from ordinary activities, present in 20 countries and 17 transportation modes, operating roughly 43,000 vehicles throughout the world. We like to say that we are pioneers in integrated mobility, despite the fact that it's not entirely true, but it's very true that we do have a lot of multimodal expertise, integrated and clear networks, data science and customer experience teams which are working hard. And this is in partly due to the fact that we used to be an operator, but today we define ourselves not only as operators, but also as integrators of daily mobilities. Now that's an important statement because where we once operated bus and rail and trams and different transportation modes, we realized, I would say 3 years back, that our role was much more global than this and that we needed to provide an integrated alternative to the individual car. The 5 strategic pillars that we have are customers, teams, clients, and communities, engaging in performance to make sure that public transportation remains economically wise, viable, and putting innovation at the heart to prepare our future and a more sustainable transport. I will get, and so I would like now to talk very briefly about our answers to the mobility challenge. So the next slide, I don't believe that I'm going to learn a lot of things for you, but basically we have 4 megatrends which are influencing the mobility market today. The first one are changing customer behaviors and expectations. And here I'm not going to, you do realize what's going on. You do realize that people are not trying to get their driving license, that the car ownership is going down, and that this is a global phenomenon and it's going to go on. I like to say that Uber was created 10 years ago, in March 2009. When you consider how urban mobility has evolved, and you try to think about mobility before Uber, you imagine the shift that has been done in the 10 years and this shift is going to accelerate. Obviously, the shifting demographics are also a big topic, and the aging population. Urbanization will continue to grow, and with this problem, urban congestions as well. And the push for green technologies is obviously here to stay. And finally, the new technologies and increased connectivity is something massive. So I just want to focus on 2 aspects of that. The first one is that the customer, may I say the passengers, are completely evolving in their needs. They need a one-plan book ticket app. This is what we call the mobility as a service. They need on-demand stops. They need real-time booking, and they need to have the choice. They need to be free of basically living in a world where you only have your individual car or public transport that doesn't work. This is basically what people are expecting today, and this is what we're seeing in the hundreds of networks that we're operating throughout the world. A word about the tech trend. That's the figures for 2019. In 2019, 2,600 startups have raised approximately 44 billion USD in just in 2018, and it's times 220 versus 2010. These companies, not all of them will survive, but the 5 to 10% which are going to make it are going to change the face of mobility as we know it. And obviously there will be a few Israeli ones given the amount that are raised in your country. The bet which is made by the VCs which are funding these players is that the combined use of simultaneously maturing technologies is going to change the game. If you think about it, in the past, if you had no connectivity, electric batteries and smartphones, you had no car sharing, no free floating, no e-hailing, all of this is dependent on the technology. Now, when you think about all the maturing technologies, will it be blockchain, stable AI, new energies, IoT, and the fact that we're going to have sensors everywhere which are going to be progressively deployed in our cities, you can think of many different innovations, going from hydrogen-powered bikes all the way to changing the way that people move and the future of work and mobility, or the computing power, the data storage, and the AI is going to enable many things in terms of predictive, autonomy, and personalization. All of this is coming, and this is why so many VCs are adamant about mobility and funding mobility startups. I was saying it. Let me stress that today the blurring frontier between public transportation and private cars will continue to expand, but up to a certain threshold. I'm not able to say, but today we are seeing this third alternative between the individual car and public collective heavy mass transit solution. The way we see the future is, as you say, pace, personalized, autonomous, connected, electric and eco-friendly. And I will try to come back to that because you will see that this space vision is pretty much in line with the jam issues that you've been mentioning. So, addressing jam, because I believe that this is what you want to talk about today. So, as a French guy, I was a bit dubious on why you would invite me to talk about jam, because as you know, jam is inescapable and a daily part of many commuters around the world, and obviously for French nationals. But I said whatever, and I realized very quickly that jam was actually something a bit less. Hold on, let me take my notes here. That jam was something maybe not as good as one could imagine. It cost hundreds of billions of dollars worldwide. I think just 300 in the US. It does not account the many lives that are killed by people eating too much jam. And obviously, jam is not about to stop. As you know, there is 10 to 15% increase. There has been a 10 to 15% increase in jam, I think, in the past 3 years globally. Okay, so too much jam will harm you. So there are essentially 3 complementary ways to deal with it. A, which is to regulate its consumption, B, which is to optimize the container, and C, to look for healthier substitutes, such as peanut butter, for example. So if we go on regulate its consumption, you could price jam like foie gras. That's what we do sometime in France to discourage individual drivers. It's an efficient, but it's a dangerous lever. I don't know if you recognize the yellow gilet, the yellow vest that we have in France, but as you know, the yellow vest turmoil started because we increased the price of gasoline, and when you constrain the people's freedom to move without providing them with alternative while destroying their economic model, this is what you get on the street. So there are many ways to regulate this, but obviously to do this, You need to do it in an intelligent manner. When I was walking in and I was seeing the TED conference of some guys in Stockholm that I had seen a few years back, which is the Stockholm experiment, which is quite an amazing experiment that shows that if you nudge people into doing things instead of constraining them to do things, then you get amazing result. And I am very much in favor of regulating it through congestion charge and road pricing system for cities, but it has to be done if there is an alternative. That's the first reason, and in an intelligent manner. That's the second reason. So that's your first lever. The second lever is to optimize space and time. Space is costly. It's been discussed extensively. The fact of increasing capacity is just not an option anymore. The fact of, but you can. There are some ways basically to optimize the infrastructure without costly manners, and I will get back to that. But today there are different ways to adapt the infrastructure to make it in line basically with the usage that we have. Time, it's complex. We've been discussing about advanced traffic modeling, the automatic traffic lights, mobility, making sure that people have flexible hours. That's your second lever, and this is something essentially that is powered by digital and analytics, which is a new layer in our industry between user interface, rolling stock infrastructure, and which is impacting everything. And I would like to say that the competition for the collection, the processing, and the database optimization of our cities is on. There are many people which are active in this sphere and which are trying to find models on how to improve the efficiency of road capacity, adapt vehicle traffic speed to the traffic conditions, and find countless ways to do more or to do better with the same infrastructure. If you ask me, given that the urbanization is going to continue to grow, any digital optimization has its limits. And if you get back to the physical world, an on-street transitway performs roughly 20 times better than private vehicles when it comes to moving people. So you can optimize with data, and it will certainly become helpful because it's an easy shot. I mean, it's an easy shot. It's a shot that we can have without massive investments. But behind, we will need to adapt the infrastructure. When you can carry 600 to 1,600 people per hour in private motor vehicles, you can do up to 25,000 with an on-street transitway bus or rail. So, if we are honest with ourselves, in an ideal world, infrastructure should mirror the efficiency of these different trip options. This is what we need to do if we want to address the problem of jam. And in other words, what we're saying is that it's not anymore about allocating our city's infrastructure for cars, which is what has been done for the past 100 years. It's about allocating our infrastructure to move as many people as possible. And that's a very important statement because it should guide the policy of many cities. Now I would like to speak about the third lever, which is a lever that concerns us most, which is peanut butter, okay? And Transdev is really involved on this third level, which is to make public transport great again. So to make public transport great again, there are several ways. And the first one is to understand why people would use peanut butter, which is to understand how the design and the demand and design the offer accordingly. We're spending a lot of time using a lot of data models to understand why people are moving according to the points of interest, where are they boarding and going down, what are the populations, the jobs, how do we mix, how do we design networks to address in the most relevant way. And we're having fantastic tools to do so, where before we did not have the data insights. Today, Transdev is conducting many experiments that increases ridership because they address a need that was unanswered for, and this is very important to have this personalized mobility. It's not only about addressing the mobility flows, it's about having a service signature and making sure that the basics of public transport are addressed, which is frequency, making sure that the time on our vehicles is not wasted, that you have acceptable level of comfort, that the transport is reliable, that it's punctual, and that it's clean. Basically, without this, nothing can happen, and you will never take one individual driver who to go back to public transport if you do not manage to convince him at least on those 6 basic factors. The second step is also about answering their need with innovative service design. I don't want to spend too much time on this because these are models that you clearly know, but there is a huge rise in transport on demand. So I've seen the amazing Dan Bubble that was launched, I think, in Tel Aviv a few weeks back. We're basically doing the same type of stuff, which is to say, we're going to address the people which are in poor density areas or in low density, or we're going to address the people which are doing stuff at night or which are working in bizarre environments, and we're going to try to find mobility solutions for them. Because if we can, they will drop their car, and we will contribute to this urban congestion on a given sector. So this is an example, a very successful example that we have in Le Havre, which is a French port west of France, and which operates 2 networks which are on demand. It's basically a bus that becomes from a fixed line route that becomes an on-demand route, and that works the same way at night. The second part I want to stress is autonomous. I'm not going to talk about the use of AVs here because otherwise I would need an extra hour. But what I want to say is that autonomous is going to contribute to the urban congestion problem only if it's shared, intermodal, interoperable, and integrated. AVs could be hell for our cities because if everybody decides to get on an autonomous vehicle instead of having a public transport, it's going to get even worse, despite the platooning, despite whatever you want. So AVs will contribute greatly to optimizing jams if they are integrated into a greater system, and that they are going for precise use case, such as taking care of travel to the nearest station or stop, or providing nighttime or off-peak service. So all of this will be possible, but we need to think about autonomous vehicles as a whole and not just as a standalone subject. And finally, I just want to stress that all of this boils down into what we call the mobility as a service, which is a peanut butter alternative that ties all these innovations together. If you want to take people out of their cars and back to public transport, you need to provide them with a seamless experience in terms of planning, booking, ticketing, and this is exactly what we're trying to do through various ways. We've invested in Mass Global, that some of you must know, which is a WIM in Helsinki, and we're doing this on the account of cities, for example, with Mulhouse or with Saint-Étienne, which are developing a single app that enables you to plan for your trip and have a ticket using intermodal ways. Mass is the single most efficient way to keep urban congestion away by reducing the number of individual cars, and maybe I'd like to push since we've been talking about Uber. I'd like to push this napkin sketch that was originally drawn for Uber and that basically created the underlying business model for Uber. The mass network effect is the same.
if we manage to have a seamless mobility experience, there will be more users, more data, more revenue, more operational optimization and more transport offers, and more personalization. And we will start to take people out of their individual cars to move to shared services. Let me finish by the fact that mass will be a collective game under the patronage and the governance of transportation authorities. We will not be able to assemble the ecosystem of startups and tech players and operators and making sure that everybody will agree on data, and nobody will, aside from public authorities which have the power, the access to infrastructure, the legislation to put everyone around the table and make sure that all these people cooperate towards a greater problem. At Transdev, we hope that we are at the forefront of mobility on these different topics. At least we try to be, because it's a very fast-paced environment. We also believe that execution is as important as ideas, because there's a lot of good ideas on mobility, but some of them are a little bit far-fetched. And we believe that open innovation is key to succeed, which is why partnerships, including with the very interesting players that we've seen at Ecomotion this week, is a key to provide a more sustainable and reinvent mobility. Thank you.